I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a drug bust on the border reveals a tricked-out tunnel spanning the length of 8 football fields. Investigators who say they put this smuggling ring out of business.
And hundreds of thousands of dollars of federal and state funding for San Diego's needy are once again left on the table. I'm Peggy Pico. Why so many eligible people aren't getting help through assistance programs. Plus, award-winning filmmaker Paul Espinosa tells me why he donated so much of his work to UC San Diego and how you could see some of his re-released films.
Demanding classes reflecting history and ethnic identity. The debate shaping up in San Diego over whose history will make it into the curriculum. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Federal officials have taken control of a new drug smuggling tunnel connecting Tijuana to Otay Mesa. It's the 10th large-scale tunnel found in the San Diego area since 2006. Our Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero has more on the investigation.
Federal authorities have found at least 75 cross-border smuggling tunnels since 2010, mostly between California and Arizona. This is one of the bigger ones. Known as a super tunnel, its length is equal to that of 8 football fields, most of it in Mexico. It has a rail system, lighting, and even a ventilation system. U.S. officials and Mexico's federal police have arrested 22 people between San Diego and Tijuana. They've also seized about 12 tons of marijuana so far, worth about $6 million. U.S. Attorney Laura Duffy says the tunnel connects 2 warehouses, one in Otay Mesa and one in Tijuana's Garita Otay neighborhood.
So these are tunnels that take a significant amount of resources and a significant amount of time to construct. And there have been instances where we found more than one a year.
The arrests and seizure were part of a 6-month investigation involving Homeland Security, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and U.S. Border Patrol. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
On the hot seat right now, a presidential candidate defending her record on Capitol Hill. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton says there were security shortcomings in Benghazi after U.S. diplomatic outposts came under attack.
One of the horrors of the hours after the attack was our failure to be able to find where the ambassador was. We hoped against hope that he had somehow gotten himself out of the compound and that he was alive somewhere, maybe in the back.
The hearing started at 7 this morning and it went on for hours. 4 Americans were killed in the attack, including the ambassador to Libya. 3 men had ties to San Diego. New details tonight on the Miramar pilot who was killed in a crash overseas. Marine Corps Air Station Miramar Major Taj Serene was trying to go home after a 6-month deployment to the Middle East. This is an earlier photo with him in uniform. His jet crashed near an airfield in England yesterday. He was stationed at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, MAS. Authorities are investigating the cause of the crash. State health authorities confirmed 2 more people in San Diego died of West Nile virus. We're now learning 4 cases were fatal this year. A 5th death is pending confirmation. County Health Agency says 18 cases of the mosquito-borne illness have been confirmed so far this year in San Diego. Experts say homeowners should empty out areas of standing water where mosquitoes breed. 1,500 psychologists at Kaiser Permanente facilities in Northern California are threatening to go on strike. From our North County Bureau, KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg has more on their complaints and the patients caught in the middle.
Kaiser clinicians statewide held a 5-day strike earlier this year over the same issue. Members of the National Union of Healthcare Workers in Northern California say it's still a problem. Therapists complain patients often have to wait months to get an appointment. Kaiser officials say they've hired nearly 500 therapists since 2011 and plan to hire 350 more by the end of this year. But union members say an increase in patients through Obamacare has outpaced any additional hiring. The union and Kaiser have been trying to hammer out a labor agreement for more than 4 years. Kaiser officials claim the union is threatening a strike to gain an advantage at the bargaining table. Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
Moving ahead with a new stadium plan in San Diego, Governor Jerry Brown says the Mission Valley project qualifies for an environmental review on the fast track. Mayor Faulkner says this keeps the project on track for opening in 2019. Chargers also weighed in, saying San Diego's environmental impact review is still flawed. The team has been working on a plan to move to Carson for a shared stadium with the Raiders. Get ready to ride. San Diego will host the first stage of the Tour of California. Organizers unveiled the host cities today along Harbor Island. The race covers hundreds of miles up and down the state. It draws the best riders in the world, many prepping for the Tour de France. Race organizers say San Diego is an ideal spot for the starting line.
We can promote that aspect of that healthy living of the region because of the Bayshore Bikeway, because of the green bike lanes in San Diego, because of bike share. So let's get people moving in different forms and fashion as a result of the race and seeing the pros do their thing.
Riders will take off from San Diego on May 15th. Final stage set for Sacramento. Ready, Aim, Fire, an Olympic training center dedicated to the sport of archery, officially opened its doors today. Hundreds of fans, including Olympic gold medalists, gather to celebrate its new state-of-the-art indoor facility in Chula Vista. There's a large outdoor range, and it has 3D technology.
Before, we just had a field and a small area to work on equipment, but this is the best facility in the entire world.
For our future athletes, it is a major promise.
The center will house several archers from around the world and prepare some for the upcoming Olympics next summer. A new report finds the county is missing out on more than $700 million in federal and state money that would help needy San Diegans. Peggy Pico takes a closer look.
The Center on Policy Initiatives, or CPI, report says San Diego County officials failed to enroll enough eligible county residents in the following 3 safety net programs: CalFresh, CalWorks, and Medi-Cal, which equates to a $1 billion loss to San Diego's economy. Joining me is Peter Brownell, Research Director at CPI. And Peter, $700 million sounds like a lot of missed opportunities here. But I understand the sign-up rates have improved over the last 5 years, right?
Yes, they have improved I think in 2010 it was closer to 30%. Now we're up to, according to the latest figure from the California Food Policy Advocates, the county's at 47.6% of potentially eligible folks.
And that's enrollment in food stamps, so almost 50%.
Stamps, sure.
So it's gone up a little, but not a whole lot.
Yeah, they've definitely made some progress, but we're still at a point where over half of the folks that are likely eligible are not enrolled, and so there's still, huge room for improvement.
Do you know why county enrollment in these safety net programs haven't seen that big jump of improvement that we need?
Our focus in the report is really looking at the numbers and revisiting that. I think that's really the next step, is for, especially for the county, working together with the community groups that convene to raise this issue, to really understand what's not working and what needs to change to make that happen. And so that's part of what we're calling on the county, to really provide the resources and the leadership to figure that out.
Sure. Now, other counties in the state seem to have figured this out. What are the numbers like there? How do we compare?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's other counties that enroll over 70% of folks. San Bernardino County is one of the other large counties that enrolls a significantly higher share. Even here nearby, Imperial County does much better than we do as a share of eligible people, even though they're a much smaller county. I think that's one place that we can turn to, is look at other counties that are more successful and try to understand what the best practices are there. Let's
talk about this impact of these people not being enrolled, not getting the federal funds for these programs, and the effect it has on San Diego's economy. How does it impact us here?
Right. So obviously, beyond the the needy families missing out on these benefits, the dollars that pay for these benefits are overwhelmingly federal and state dollars. And so what that means is we're missing out on an infusion of money from outside the region into our region, which would help grow the economy. So it's, as you mentioned, over $700 million in direct benefits that would go to families. And that, with that spending, generates, over $900 million, so nearly $1 billion in economic activity in the region. That creates over 6,000 jobs. That generates $4.7 million in new sales tax revenues every year. So, basically, in terms of our economic development, we typically would jump at any chance to bring hundreds of millions of dollars into the region from outside the region, and we feel like, given that context and the need of the struggling families, that the county really needs to step up and do everything that it can.
No, you touched on this, but does all of the money for programs like CalFresh and Medi-Cal, does that all come from federal and state? The overwhelming majority of it does. For CalWorks, a small share comes from the county. So essentially, for adding additional applicants, about 2.5% of the benefits would be paid by the county. Additionally, the county does share in some of the program administration costs. But for CalFresh, for example, every dollar that goes into beneficiaries' pockets comes from the state or federal government. Well, groups behind this report, there were a coalition of groups. They're calling on the county supervisors, of course, to take action on this. Has the county responded?
We haven't heard any response from the county yet at this point.
And what would you like to see the county supervisors do? I know this report is about what's actually happening here and sort of comparisons, but is there something you'd like to see how they could use this report?
What I really hope is that this really starts a conversation, that it, that the county, what we call on the county supervisors to do is to set a goal of full enrollment by 2020, and to provide the resources to study the problem and understand what steps they need to start taking. So, putting the resources, working with the community groups, but setting that goal of full enrollment and not leaving those dollars on the table.
All right, Peter Brownell, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Elmo and Julia both like playing games on the tablet.
New kid on the block, Sesame Street debuts Julia, its first character with autism. She's part of the See Amazing in All Children initiative. The show is trying to take the stigma out of autism. Show producers hope Julia will help kids understand how to better interact with their autistic peers. California classrooms have become more ethnically diverse, and educators in San Diego and around the state say that should be reflected by teaching ethnic studies in high school. But the idea has some critics asking whose history will be taught. Associate producer Maria Elena Castellanos takes a look.
In 2011, hundreds of students packed a school board meeting room at the Tucson Unified School District in Arizona, hoping they'd keep an ethnic studies class from ending. Opponents said the class would create resentment and divisiveness in students. Supporters disagreed. The class was canceled, but the issue has not gone away. In fact, it has arrived in San Diego. Guillermo Gomez, a Spanish teacher of 19 years with the San Diego Unified School District, believes the current curriculum offers little diversity and lacks cultural relevancy, which he says disengages most students.
It's very narrow. It's very Eurocentric, and that's enough for kind of more ground to students to be able to explore certain types of histories.
In the San Diego Unified School District, 76% of the student population is non-white. And while no ethnic studies program has been approved at San Diego Unified, word is spreading, and some students welcome the change. One of those is Diana Andraca, a senior at Lincoln High School. She says she's excited not just for herself, but also for her little brother, because she says she learns very little about her own culture and history at school.
And it's like, no, it's not supposed to be like that. You're supposed to know your background, where you came from.
In March, the San Diego School Board passed a resolution to form a committee on ethnic studies issues. and for the committee to come back with a list of recommendations for the superintendent before the end of the year. School districts in Los Angeles and San Francisco have already committed to offering every high school student an opportunity to take an ethnic studies course. Those efforts also inspired a bill in the legislature requiring the classes to be offered as electives across the state. But that campaign suffered the setback of a veto by Governor Brown, who said the state is still establishing new guidelines for social sciences, which would include ethnic studies. Republican California Assemblymember Rocky Chavez, the vice chair of the State Education Committee, voted against the bill and doesn't see the need for ethnic studies. He says students of color should focus more on math and science.
They're underperforming than their counterparts. So introducing a new class that would take time away from their traditional studies, I didn't think would help out.
Chavez is also concerned ethnic studies classes could leave some students out.
So how do you prioritize one culture or ethnic study over another? And how does a professor deal with somebody maybe from Ethiopia or South Africa or the Ukraine? Or are we going to be slanted strictly to children who, let's say, are from Mexico?
But Roberto Hernandez, a professor of Chicano studies at San Diego State, says ethnic studies shouldn't be seen as something that simply takes time away from math and science.
Ethnic studies in particular is precisely about changing the world in ways much more fundamental even than math and science, or at bare minimum alongside math and science.
In response to Chavez's other point, San Diego Unified Economics and Government teacher Kiki Ochoa says there should be flexibility when it comes to fashioning a course.
You would tweak it to your audience. So if you're in a community that's predominantly African American, obviously, you would tweak it to that audience.
Many supporters of ethnic studies described it as a way to prepare students for living in a society that is ethnically diverse. Larry Thurman, a U.S. history teacher at San Diego Unified, says for him, the change is not just about improving test scores and raising grades.
In the history, the identity, it's all connected because your history is part of your identity. And we're trying to build, not just create, a great student. We want a great citizen. We want the person after here to be successful, be a productive member of our society, be caring about other people's situations.
The details on the program need to get ironed out. Thurman says he expects pushback from those opposed to an ethnic studies curriculum when a final plan is presented to the school district. For KPBS News, I'm Maria Elena Castellanos.
An award-winning San Diego filmmaker returns to his roots. Peggy Pico talks with him about his latest contribution.
In celebration of his work and archive donation to UC San Diego, 3 of Paul Espinosa's films will be shown at various theaters throughout San Diego starting tomorrow. The filmmaker has made dozens of films since the 1980s and produced some of them right here while working at KPBS. Paul Espinosa, welcome back.
Very nice to be here.
Now, border and immigration issues are high profile right now in the nation. How much were people talking about these types of things when you were making some of your documentaries back in the 1980s?
Well, I think the border has always been a topic of a lot of interest, and even at that time I would say there was considerable interest in the topic. I think there was probably a tendency to look at it in a very stereotypical way, and I think that was part of the work that I was involved in, was trying to present some alternatives to that, give a bigger, a broader view of the border. Of course, my work has been not just about the border, but also the Latino community in the United States, in San Diego or along the border itself. But yeah, it was. I think it's changed. Today, of course, in a post 9/11 world, we live in a different kind of world in terms of how we view, the border, which I think has actually been an unfortunate step back, really, because I think there's so much that needs to be done in terms of cooperation in this region, whether you're talking about water or transportation or environment, whatever, and we need, more attention paid to, our relationships across the border.
Speaking of immigration and maybe the sort of issues that might still be resonating today, your docudrama, the Lemon Grove incident, reveals one of the first successful legal challenges to school segregation. It happened in San Diego County back in 1931, your film says, long before the Supreme Court case of Brown versus the Board of Education. Let's take a look.
Okay.
Mexican workers contributed to the growth of Lemon Grove's industries, working in the rock quarry, the packing house, and the citrus orchards. Lemon Grove's only elementary school enrolled almost 200 students. By 1930, the fact that nearly half of these students were of Mexican heritage was a threat to some residents. For these children, the decision to build a separate Mexican school marked the beginning of a dramatic episode they would remember all their lives.
So you made this film about 30 years ago. Are there issues in the film that still resonate today?
Well, certainly the issue of education. I think at that time and even today, there was sort of a stereotype that somehow Latino parents weren't interested in education. And sort of this particular film, I think, showed that here were, in many cases, people who were, Mexican nationals still, whose children were, U.S. citizens, who basically were willing to go to court to fight for their children's rights in 1931. This is basically during the very beginning of the Depression, a very difficult period which leads into this very massive repatriation of Mexican Americans and Mexicans during the 1930s. But so anyway, it was I think an important film. I think the issue of just parental involvement in children's education still is an important issue.
Now, you just donated 200 boxes, I understand, or of your professional archive to UC San Diego. What's in that archive? What's included in there?
Well, the archive basically is materials related to all of these films that I've done, the Lemon Grove Incident and many other films that I've done over many years. That includes obviously scripts and revisions of scripts, but I think most importantly it includes real interviews, transcripts of interviews that were done with many people. In fact, it includes in many cases audio tape interviews that were done. These were sort of in some cases pre-interviews that we did on films. Let's say like In the Shadow of the Law, another film that I did was one of the first national documentaries looking at undocumented immigrants that had been in the United States for a long period of time. So we have interviews with many people. This is in the late 80s. We used that material for a particular purpose in our film, but those interviews are going to exist for other people to look at and basically get a slice of life of what was happening, at that particular moment in time. So I think it's going to be very valuable, particularly as time goes on and more people have a chance to look at it and see what's there. I think I'm extremely happy that for these papers to be at UCSD. I think they're a wonderful institution. They have the resources to manage, a collection like this. So it's been a great relationship.
Are you currently working on any new projects?
I am working on a film on a local musician, Ramon Chunky Sanchez, a well-known musician. In fact, we did a performance show right here in the KPBS studios back in the early 90s with Chunky and his band. He's been around since he's been a musician since the early 70s, and it's sort of a portrait of him as an artist and sort of the evolution and development of an artist, but also look at the larger picture of the Chicano Civil Rights Movement and some of the things that happened during that time period, maybe reminding people why some of these issues are still important today.
All right, Paul Espinosa, thanks so much for joining us.
Great, thank you.
And the Paul Espinosa film series starts tomorrow and runs through November 10th. It's at various locations throughout San Diego. We've got more information on our website, kpbs.org.
Taking a closer look at an artistic dream come true at Balboa Park, Ken Kramer has more on the special spot that makes some folks feel like royalty.
The Balboa Park we know today began with the 1915 Panama, California Exposition. We're marking the 100th anniversary of this World Fair by sharing your special moments and memories of Balboa Park. One Encinitas woman tells us about her favorite place in Balboa Park and the memories associated with it.
I am here in my favorite museum in the world. My name is June Pecchia, and I'm a native of Chula Vista, California. I've been coming to the San Diego Museum of Art since I was in my early 20s. It's so old world looking, and being from San Diego, we don't have that much that's really old world looking. So the ornateness appealed to me. The staircase is just so glorious. You walk down that staircase and you feel like you are the center, like you're royalty. So I really do love that staircase. And the detail of the fresco type art of the building is wonderful. You can do top to bottom in one day and have a whole feeling of the museum. And I really appreciate that. The one that I really remember and I have a bonding with is the Muka exhibit. I got to share with my friend from Japan. We both got to share our perspectives on that art, and we both just loved it, so it has that personal connection. The other one that really struck me was the Frank Lloyd Wright exhibit on his architecture. There was out in the parking lot, somehow they blocked it off, and they actually had a house that you could walk through. And it was wonderful that he did the furniture and the building, and that his goal was that these were homes for everyday people. So the whole gamut of culture you can find at this museum, especially if you go over the course of many years. This kind of is a center for us to show our sense of culture. Also, a lot of the exhibits reflect local culture, and it is a gathering place. The whole Balboa Park is just such a dream of a place. I don't think there is any place like this on earth.
KPBS's Brooke Ruth produced that story. To share your Balboa Park memory and to see other memories shared with KPBS, visit kpbs.org/memories.
Plenty of autumn sunshine in San Diego right through the weekend. We're looking at 70s, 80s along the coast, a mix of sun and clouds, 70s, 80s for the inland valleys, 70s in the mountains if you're headed towards Julian, and in the desert, mostly in the 90s. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.